Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Talk About It Tuesday. I'm your host, Malin.
And I'm your other host, Jamie.
And today's article is a blast from the past.
It is.
Yeah, I didn't think we'd be talking about this anytime in the near future, but here we are. Today's article comes from us from CNN. Looks like it was updated back on January 19th of this year. And the headline reads, Los Angeles Innocence Project representing Scott Petersen, the man convicted of killing pregnant wife. When I read this, Jamie, I got to be honest. I mean, all of a sudden, the Nancy Grace episodes that I used to watch, all of the news articles, the searching for Lacey.
I mean, Nancy Grace is blast to the past too.
Wow. I know it. It all came flooding back to me. I was like, whoa, how much time has passed? What's going on? So I thought that was it was nostalgic for me, to say the least.
20 years ago, Malin. I mean, according to the article, this was 20 years ago the conviction happened, and they're pulling it back up. So can you kind of tell us what's in the article?
So the Los Angeles Innocence Project is now representing Scott Petersen, who was convicted of murder in 2004 in the death of his wife and unborn son. So they are, if you don't know who the Innocence Project is, they are a nonprofit organization which works to exonerate people who are wrongfully convicted and incarcerated. So this group of individuals are looking at Scott Petersen, possibly representing him. Scott Petersen, now 51, was sentenced to death back in 2005, again, after he was convicted of murdering his wife, Lacey, and their unborn son, Connor. If I go back a little bit, I don't want to have to rehash the entire 20-year-old case. But if you remember, Peterson reported his wife missing from the couple's Modesto, California home in December of 2002. Lacey was, I think at the time, 6 or 7 months pregnant. And then when she disappeared. And then in April of 2003, the bodies of Lacey and Connor were found separately washed up in the San Francisco Bay.
Well, and I think originally, wasn't he sentenced to life?
I think he was sentenced to the death penalty, actually.
Oh, yeah, the death penalty. And then they overturned it to life in prison, right?
In 2020, the California Supreme Court overturned Peterson's death sentence after finding that potential jurors were erroneously dismissed. So they changed it from the death penalty to life in prison, it looks like.
Wow.
Then in April of 2023, Peterson's attorney filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus, which they alleged violations of state and federal constitutional rights and state statutory rights, including a claim of actual innocence that is supported by newly discovered evidence. And that is why the Los Angeles Innocence Project is entertaining or taking on his case, is because of that new evidence that came to light. So that's basically the article in a nutshell, just kind of giving us a little bit of a history to remind us of, kind of where we started, and the fact that there now seems to be new evidence that Scott Petersen is innocent of these crimes and should be released. And the Innocence Project is looking to take on his case. I have some thoughts here, but Jamie, I'm going to pause to catch my breath. What are you thinking?
Well, I guess for me, the Innocence Project, I've heard about them through a number of different things, because I am kind of recently, this is a recent thing. We all know about my affinity for Grey's Anatomy and then now Breaking Bad. But now I'm into these documentaries and these docuseries about true crime stories and stuff like that. And so I've heard about the Innocent Project through a couple of those. And it seems like they do good work. Just because they're involved doesn't mean that they're innocent, but if there's evidence there, then I would certainly hope if I were in that case that I could get help from someone who would be able to prove my innocence if that's the case. So glad organizations like that exist, but I don't know. It's such a weird thing because this was such a big deal. It was
unbelievable. It was huge. It was all that it was all that anybody talked about forever.
Mm-hmm.
So here's where I stand. And, I guess the article does mention a little bit that there was some some evidence that they're asking to be turned over to Peterson's attorneys now that was not included in the discovery, I think, of the original time of the trial. And if things like that happen, if there is evidence that has not been heard in the trial, yes, by all means, this needs to be looked at. Where I pause is, and just because it's a high profile case, that doesn't mean that things like this don't occur. However, I would find it very hard to believe that not every piece of evidence was thoroughly combed over for how long of the investigation, how long this was in the public's eye, and how long the trials went on. I just find it very remarkable that there's even a possibility of evidence not being presented or given to the defense at the time the trial was going on. Does that mean that it didn't happen or it did happen? I don't know. But the way that this was, covered back then, I would find it really hard to believe that there was something missing. I would be more apt to believe if they found new DNA evidence, right? Because technology has advanced and they were able to do more DNA tests that they couldn't do back then. That is more believable to me than, oh, here's some missing evidence that we didn't tell you about during the trial. And I guess that's where I'm at with all of this.
Yeah, I also, though, I do think that there are so many times where I think, and I've seen this in obviously lower profile places, and different situations, completely different situations where people will talk about how they tried to get help and no one would listen and things like that. And so I don't know, maybe it's a case of that. Who knows? I have to place my trust in the legal system because it's the system that we have. And so, I'm super hopeful that, whatever comes of this, he made appeals and things like that. But I also know that like the appeal process, and I don't know if it's like this for all cases because, hello, not a lawyer, but, where they...
No, we should have that disclaimer. We are not,
right.
We are not attorneys and have no real law experience.
This is not legal commentary or legal advice. But I know that there are some cases where when you appeal it to the Supreme Court, it's really not about like overturning the decision as much as it is to making sure that the correct procedures and policies were followed, that the trial was fair and it was played out in the way it was supposed to. So just because he's lost all of his appeals, that may not mean anything. It may just be a checks and balance of the procedures to make sure that they were done properly. So if there's new evidence and it comes out that it's true evidence, then if an innocent man is sitting in jail, by all means, that's not okay. Unfortunately, the court of public opinion had decided long before whether or not this guy was innocent or guilty before the jury ever decided. But
and if I could speculate for a second, I'm going back in memory, so I'm going to put that caveat out there. His story, I think, is what made people go, right? Like if I remember the things that he was even talking about, I was like, oh, this is not going to be good for him. And it ended up not being good for him. Here's a perspective, though, that I want to share because our last talk about it, I think we had a similar conversation about it. I think it was Donald Trump and is he convicted of anything and is innocent until proven guilty. In this case, this is something that is a little bit different for me because he's been convicted. So anytime anybody, let's just take Scott Petersen out of the equation, anytime somebody's been convicted and now they're coming back to say, no, I'm really innocent, I have new evidence or I need a new trial, whatever it is, right, wrong, or indifferent, I kind of look at them as, okay, you're guilty, you've been proven guilty, now you have to prove your innocence. So it goes a little bit different for me now. So when I look at this case for Scott Petersen, in my mind, I'm like, you're guilty. You've been found guilty. Now the burden of proof is for you to tell me how wrong the system got it and how wrong my opinion of you is because of that conviction that he has. And now he has to start fighting the other way, which again, I think that's just a different, perspective for me because I do try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt of innocent until proven guilty. but he's been proven guilty. So now where do we go?
Well, and I think that's the whole process with him coming back with the habeas corpus to say, hey, I am wrongly imprisoned. I think that is exactly what has to happen, is that, his attorneys, the Innocence Project, is going to have to work to overcome all of the previous evidence and convictions and all of that in order to prove his innocence. And that's, it's definitely a tough hill to climb. I think what's interesting is, here's what these things make me think of, right? It makes me wonder how often does this happen? We're just hearing about this one because of the high profile that it was. You know what I mean? You have those celebrity trials that happen, and that's he wasn't a celebrity or anything, but it became that status. So it makes me wonder how often does this happen? Like, what percentage of convictions are, and I'm sure it's very, very small, end up being overturned because of new evidence and things like that. But it makes me wonder when's the last time this happened in my state? Like, how often does this happen? It's interesting to think about. The other thing I thought about was, what does this guy's life look like if he gets out? Like, if they overturn the conviction because they find him innocent, what does his life look like after that? Because I can't imagine.
Yep. So, and that's where I was going to, because you brought up a couple times now, I think, in previous conversations, the opinion, the court of public opinion. So to me, that's where I'm like, okay, say he has new evidence and he gets out, the stigma that's going to be attached to him. Because even in the face of evidence, it happens when you can find evidence of somebody who is 100% guilty. There are always people that are like, nope, don't believe it. He's innocent in my eyes. You have the wrong man. I can only imagine there's the same types of people that will be faced with no, he's actually innocent. Here's evidence that is proved that he was, incarcerated, found guilty, and he shouldn't have been. And they're going to say the same thing. They're like, nope, don't believe it. He's guilty. And so when he gets out, or if he gets out, let's say if he gets out because of there's this new evidence and he truly is innocent, the question that comes to my mind is, how innocent or how free will he really be when everyone's going to know who he is, and I'm using air quotes, what he did, and what kind of a life is he going to be able to walk into if in fact he is innocent and there is new evidence for him. I only see it as going from one prison to another prison. Yeah, he might not be confined to four walls, but he's still going to be a prisoner.
The next court hearing I would want my attorney to file would be a name change. Because seriously, well, and that I can't remember the name of it, or even what platform I was watching it on, but there was a whole series of, and it might have been the Innocence Project, where they went and did investigate these different things to bring new evidence to the court. And when that conviction is overturned, not only do you have someone who has spent, and truthfully, he was 30 years old or something, 31 when he went to prison, 20 years in prison. And how do you even adjust to life outside of that? Just so many hurdles to overcome. So it's not like this will not have, should he be released, this would have lasting impacts on him. And that's, wow. Just, it blows my mind thinking about it.
Yeah. And you asked a really good question. So of course I had to go to our in-house data analyst, also known as Google. And Google has said that on studies have shown, or the estimate is about 4 to 6% of people who are incarcerated are actually innocent. So 4 to 6 out of 100 people who are in prison shouldn't be, because they are actually innocent on average. It's a small number mathematically, but it's not a small number realistically. I was going to say, I agree with you, but go talk to the people that fall on that 4 to 6%. I bet they tell you it's pretty big.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my goodness. Well, and thankfully, technology, you mentioned technology, it is changing. And yeah, I do think investigative efforts have gotten better and, things like, well, and let's be real, there's probably very little time of our lives that we are actually off of a camera of some sort. So, I'm sure all of that helps. But, if this guy's been sitting in jail, for this many years, innocent, that's unfortunate. And he's got a long road ahead of him to come back.
It is unfortunate, and I'm sorry, but I'm going to voice my court of public opinion. He has a long road to walk to get people to start believing him. So I hope the evidence is there for him. Because I got to be honest, I heard the name Scott Petersen and my whole body clenched, and I was like, oh, now what? And what an uphill battle this man has to go through in order to even get a fair trial now, even to get looked at a second time or a third time. I don't know how many times he's appealed. But for this Innocent Project to take notice and say, okay, because my understanding of the Innocent Project, which again isn't extensive, is they usually only get involved if there is legitimate reason for somebody who is incarcerated who shouldn't be incarcerated. So
yep.
The only thing that's really working, in my opinion, in his favor is the fact that the Innocent Project has such a fantastic reputation for helping individuals who are wrongly convicted, that's the only thing that's giving it merit to us taking another look. And what a long road he has to walk to overcome that.
Well, and that's the only thing that kind of turned my head about that too, is, if the Innocence Project is getting involved, they must have seen something that made them think that I don't think they often take on cases they don't think they can win, right?
Right. They don't waste their time with that.
Right. Most attorneys don't. So it'll be fascinating to see what comes of it and I'm also interested to see if it's going to be as big as the original trial was. Will this be as big and will this be as talked about as it was 20 years ago? I'm curious to see how that plays out.
I'm with you. It was such a media circus that could this reignite that? Possibly. Have people, are they exhausted and they just want to move on? I don't know. I just want to know what evidence. Like, now I'm all about, you show me what that evidence is. Like, I want to be on the trial. Can I be on the trial to listen to that evidence? If I can put my name out there, I would love to be a juror on that trial.
Move to California, move to LA. And in the middle of the snow and yuck that we've had, maybe that is super appealing to you, but
gladly.
I'll ride out my cold weather here without alligators, thankfully. So
okay, well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for us. We'll continue to watch the Scott Petersen news. You guys, thank you for joining us for this conversation. Just a reminder, if you're listening and you're liking this segment, if you have any news articles that are weird, fascinating, breaking news, whatever it is, send them our way. We'd like to look through them and possibly air it here on our podcast. So
we do really love the court of public opinion. So we'd love to hear your opinion on this episode also. What do you think about Scott Petersen getting re-looked at for possible innocence? I'd be fascinated to know.
As I stifle a giggle when I hear Scott Petersen and the word innocent. Sorry,
I know.
That's my public opinion. All right. We will see you guys next week with a whole new article and a whole new set of opinions. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.